You've entered the Rock is Lit Vault.
Hello, Lit listeners. This Rock is Lit Vault offering has its origins in the Season 1 finale, aka Episode 17, featuring Sarah Priscus, whose debut rock novel Groupies was published in the summer of 2022. Groupie shines a light on the grungy, yet glittery world of 1970s Los Angeles rock and roll and the women, the groupies, who unapologetically love too much in a world that doesn't love them back. In the final segment of that episode, I interviewed super groupie Pamela Barr, author of the seminal groupie memoir I'm With the Band, to give some real-world context to Sarah's novel. I'd been wanting to meet Pamela since I first read I'm With the Band in the late 1980s when I was 18 years old. What a thrill it was to talk to her via Zoom one cold mid-December afternoon in 2022, both of us having recently recovered, in my case, or in the process of recovering, in her case, from ankle injuries and COVID, sort of like a soul sister thing. I could only fit a portion of our conversation into episode 17. Here is the full interview with Pamela. Have a listen, then check out episode 17 with Sarah Priscus and Pamela wherever you get your podcast. If you like what you hear, do me a solid and leave a comment and a rating on Good Pods or Apple Podcasts. And now, without further blather, here's my interview with the lovely and legendary Pamela Barr. How you're feeling better from COVID? I know you've had COVID. I know you broke your ankle, but you're doing better.
It's one of those time frames, but just in the last day or two, because the COVID turned into a sinus infection. So I went through that. But
Oof.
Today I feel almost myself again. It's taken almost a month. Well, 6 weeks if you count the whole ankle. 7.
Yeah.
7 weeks yesterday. Yeah. So it's been rough, but I haven't let it stop me. I haven't missed one writing workshop.
Are you serious? Good grief.
Yeah. I keep doing them. I keep holding them. They're so important to me. My writing workshops are really my reason, raison d'etre.
Yeah, I hear you.
Many years, and 22 years I've been doing them now.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. All right, well, we're going to talk about some serious stuff here, namely the Los Angeles music scene in the 70s, because that's the period covered in Sarah Priscus's debut novel, Groupies.
Right.
But first, let's do a little warm-up, mainly because I am nervous, because I have wanted to meet you since I was 18. So this is mainly for me. So fun facts. Your go-to music for house cleaning.
It's always Dylan. Dylan's my go-to music for everything. So I now just say, Alexa, play a selection of 60s Dylan or 70s Dylan or 80s Dylan or 90s Dylan, 2000. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm it's always Dylan for me is the go-to for just about everything.
Wow. Mm-hmm. CDs, vinyl, or cassettes?
Vinyl.
Me too. Absolutely. Physical books, audiobooks, or Kindle?
But all of those. Yeah, I read and listen to books as often as I can. And I'm a big reader and a big listener. And I have a really great Kindle. I've got 1,000 books on it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. My son and I kind of share.
I see.
Kindle, yeah.
So do you have similar tastes then?
He has more of a fantasy taste, but we both love Stephen King, and we both love mysteries, and we have similar tastes, but he's more of a fantasy person than I am.
Okay. What's your desert island pick for your album? What album are you taking with you?
Bringing It All Back Home.
Good choice.
Yeah.
All right. One more.
All right.
What's one thing about you that would surprise folks who know you only as Miss Pamela, the celebrity?
Well, I'm a Buddhist, along with being a Christian. I'm a Christian Buddhist. I know it's kind of hard to imagine that, but I've always been a Jesus girl. And he and the Buddha himself say the same things. Jesus never said, I am you can't do anything without me. He never really said that. All that stuff was put in his mouth later. He was just trying to remind us who we are, which is the same thing the Buddha did. And so that is something a lot of people don't know about me. But my next book, Sex, God, and Rock and Roll, will be I'll be writing all about that.
I love it. Well, you're an ordained minister, aren't you?
Yes, I'm an ordained minister. I perform weddings, and I always love being the third party triumvirate. It's really a blessing, and it's nerve-wracking too, though,
Mm.
because you feel the energy from them because it's the
They're nervous.
heightened moment of their lives, you know.
Yeah.
So there I am in the middle of that. It's really something.
Okay, that's my dream wedding. I have a fiance. We need to fly out to LA and get Miss Pamela to marry us. It would be the awesome rock and roll wedding.
Or you can fly me somewhere.
Oh, well, that's true.
I just got flown to Denver and performed a really great wedding there. Really,
Wow.
yeah, beautiful.
Okay, moving along, getting to the more serious stuff. So, as you know, this episode of Rock is Lit features Sarah Priscus's novel Groupies about fictional bands and groupies in LA in the 70s. And when I told her that I was going to try and get you to come on and be the music guru for that, she just flipped out. She was so excited. So, we're just thrilled that you could come add some real world context to that very issue, that very time period. So,
Right.
let's back up just a little bit first and talk about the 60s so we can appreciate that contrast between the decades. Can you pinpoint the moment or event that transformed you from Pam Miller from Reseda, California to Miss Pamela, Queen of the Groupies, as Bryant Gumbel gave you that title many years later?
That was scary. I said, really? Okay, that's news to me. Well, it started when my friend Victor invited me to the second annual teen fair at the Hollywood Palladium to meet his cousin Don Van Vliet, Captain Beefheart, and Spam.
Of course.
And I was very kind of nervous to meet him too. Was this big grizzled, even though he was only probably 26 at the time, and I was like, oh. And he looked me up and down and said, "You're a gas. I wish there were more people like you."
Wow.
So that was a really great moment. And he called me Pamela. Victor introduced me as Pam, and Don Van Vliet said, "Oh, Pamela, I wish." And I went, "Pamela, wow, that's my full name. Okay, I'm going to use it." And Victor called me Pamela from then on. And I went from Pam to Pamela. It freaked out my Beatles girlfriends because I got into the Stones at the same time. Victor turned me on to a lot of music, Dylan, and that was a life changer. And I had been over the hill, and I said, "Whoa, this is Hollywood." It was really like a different universe from the valley where I lived.
Yeah.
It was I lived in a very Leave It to Beaver type, Technicolor situation in the valley. Everything was sort of perfect. There was it was serene compared to Hollywood, but I was finished with serenity at that point. So that did it. I started hitchhiking over the hill or driving if I had a car and just hanging out with the kids in Hollywood. And there were thousands of them.
Oh yeah, I bet. I thought you were going to pinpoint that moment in 1966 when you knocked on the backstage door of this club on the Strip and got in to see the Byrds.
Yeah, that's a
1966.
Yeah, well, this was probably 65 when I met Don.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. So I was already Pamela. I wasn't Miss Pamela until Tiny Tim christened all those GTOs Miss. Met Tiny Tim. Well, Miss Lucy knew him from New York, and we went to visit him. And when we walked in, he said, "Oh, Miss Mercy, Miss Pamela," So that's how that started. And then it just stuck. And I mean, for decades, Robert Plant called me Miss Pamela or Miss P. And a lot of people still do. Call me that, even though I'm in my 70s now.
Girl, you look good. You do. I mean,
I can't accept it. I can't admit it. I admit it because I can't fake my birth date because I wrote books about myself. Not that I would, I try to be very honest all the time. But, it feels weird sometimes to think how long I've been on the planet.
Yeah, but God, what a life you have led. Look at the people you've met. You were Frank Zappa's kid's nanny. You were hanging out with the Byrds and the Stones and the Who and early Zeppelin. And And then you and your friends formed the GTOs, and I have been singing the Ooh Ooh Man all afternoon, just, I'm in love with the Ooh. Yeah, I mean, you did Permanent Damage. I love that album.
It's a unique record. It really just Frank was always wanting to capture moments in time, and he just thought the bunch of us girls, we were a dance troupe on the Strip, and we danced with Three Dog Night and Love and bands like that. And we were a dance troupe called the Laurel Canyon Ballet Company, we called ourselves. And Frank just had started a label, and he thought we had something to say because we were always gabbing to him.
Mm-hmm.
We always wanted to tell him stories and get him happy and excited. And he would pick you up off the floor, and it was just so exciting. We loved him so much, and wanted to impress him. So he could pull those stories out of us, and we turned them into songs.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so maybe I'm romanticizing that time, but I just, when I think of the 60s and the LA music scene, it just seems like a really magical time. And then in 1969, you have the Manson murders, and Altamont happened. And it's like, hello, 1970, and we're ushered into this whole different decade with a whole different vibe. And speaking of the Manson murders, didn't you briefly know Bobby Beausoleil?
Yeah, I made out with him. In those early days, I made out with people. He took me to the Golden Gate Park. I used to hitchhike up north and hang out on Haight-Ashbury and Berkeley, and just
Mm-hmm.
looking for really cute boys, and going to the Fillmore and seeing bands. And he was just one of the cute boys. We called him Bummer Bob because he was always asking for money, and he wore a beautiful top hat and a long coat. He was gorgeous, and he had a dog that he always had with him, a big white dog.
Mm.
And he was just, one of the hippies up and down Haight-Ashbury. And I hung out with him a few times, and we made out, and he was just a beautiful boy.
Mm-hmm.
Way before he met Charles Manson, many years, like at least 3 years, 4 years maybe, before they met. And I guess Manson had some sort of hypnotic, uh, I don't know, vibe that made people do things they wouldn't ordinarily have done, because
Apparently.
it didn't seem like his nature to do such a thing.
Yeah.
He was a cute hippie boy that was singing in different bands in San Francisco.
Hmm. Well, did you notice that there was a different vibe in LA once the 70s hit?
No, the vibe didn't really change for me. I mean, those were two incidents. Yes, that was a drag, but that was just the Stones making the mistake of hiring the Hells Angels. They thought it was going to be cool, and it was anything but cool. The Hells Angels thought they could just take over, but
Yeah.
that's why that happened. It wasn't because, oh, everything's changing now. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. And Manson was a fake hippie. He was not a real hippie.
Sure.
He would just it was like my one of my mentors, Vito, who I danced with, the artist and dancer Vito. I joined his troupe. Not that he was evil like Manson, but he was a chameleon, and whatever was going on, he wanted to be in the center of it. So he had been a beatnik and everything, and then he of course became a long-haired freak,
Yep.
because he could gather a lot more girls and people around him and have more fun. And Manson just happened to be an evil version of that, where he was not really a hippie or a peacenik or a flower person or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And he wasn't even a very good musician. So I didn't equate those situations with what my lifestyle was and what was going on at the time. What changed for me was 73, 70, late 72, 73. There were more hard drugs coming into it, cocaine especially, which was just a horrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was getting much more prolific in the music world. People were dabbling in it in the 60s, Graham Parsons certainly, and me, but it just got really full blown, and also heroin,
Heroin.
and meth and all that stuff started happening. And that's when, and the girls got real young, and they were interloping on my scene, on my world. And I decided, that's when I met Michael, and it was really
Right.
great timing for me. my ex-husband. Yeah.
Yep. You guys got married in 77?
Yeah, we met on his birthday, January 24th, his 26th birthday in 1974.
Well, you mentioned the young groupies, so let's stick with that for a second. What's your take on that? Because we're smack dab still in the Me Too movement. So, what are your feelings about that? Are you philosophical about it looking back now, or do you kind of Because my take on it is this was a very different era, a very different time, and a lot of that was going on in a bubble. But I wasn't there. What are your thoughts?
Well, I was annoyed because they had something I didn't have. I
Yeah.
was still only 23 or 24, and they looked at me like I was an old bag. In fact, Sable called me an old bag right in front of Elton John one time. And, I was in my early 20s. So for me, it was personal. And they came along with their tiny little bodies. And, they were little bitty girls. I'm 14 and 15.
Yeah.
But it wasn't unusual in that time frame. So it and in that world, like you called it a bubble, I guess you could call it that. But that was just happening. It was happening all over the country and probably all over Europe. And I mean, it wasn't just Hollywood or anything. Girls were loving the music. They were hearing it, wanted to be around it. Same like with me. I met the Byrds when I was 17. I wasn't ready to jump in the sack with them, but I wanted to meet them. I wanted to hang out with them. I wanted to be part of that world. And so did Lori and Sable and all the other girls in all the other situations. Lori and Sable just happened to be in my world.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you heard the word groupie?
I think I do. I wrote about it several times. I think I remember when I first heard it I was hanging out with Zeppelin at the Hyatt House, which we called the Riot House, and someone called me that. I was standing there waiting to get in the cars to go to the Forum or somewhere, and someone said, "Oh, she must be a groupie," and I wasn't. That was new to me. Although I've scoped it out since then, and it was a word already in England, coined by a journalist.
Okay.
Before then, but first time I heard it, I'm pretty sure it was that. It's hard to remember exactly. People's memories get all jumbled up if they live a long time, like I have. But I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Well, tell me give me your definition of groupie. I mean, take ownership of that damn word. What does it mean
I
to
always
you?
have.
Yeah.
Well, there was a time actually I didn't want to be called that because at first it didn't bother me at all because it was just a word that meant someone who hung out with groups. And that's really all it still means. Someone who wants to hang out with rock groups. That's what the word started out as. And they weren't all women. There was Rodney and Kim Fowley and a lot of different people who wanted to hang out with musicians because they were, especially with Dylan. Dylan started, he made lyrics important. The music became much deeper, much more important, far-reaching, and people wanted to be around it. They just wanted to be around that energy and the excitement, of course, the sexiness of it all. And that's really all it meant. But in about 1970, it just became more of a pejorative word. People are still, especially in America, uptight sexually. They still are. It's so, as if it has anything. It's none of their business what anyone does. So it's always confused me. But for a little while there, I didn't want to be associated with the word. But that was brief time. Well, certainly when I wrote on with the band, I claimed it. I said I am this, and I'm a groupie at heart. And it's a very, very mixed up word, even in Almost Famous, which is usually it's a positive look at the groupie, which is the only part of the movie I like. But she tried to kill herself over some rock guy, which just pissed me off, man. So it's a misunderstood word.
Well, I know you've got a bone to pick with Cameron Crowe, and he should have made you a consultant on that film.
Yes, he should have. He tried to make it up to me. There's a chapter on him in Let's Spend the Night Together because he said, let me do something for you. So he told the whole story of that movie in Let's Spend the Night Together. A lot of people don't remember that. They want to read the groupie stories, but the final chapter is Cameron's, story about making Almost Famous.
So there's a line in Sarah Priscus's novel Groupies. A character is talking about the word groupie, and she says, no one sneers and says groupie unless they wish they were one. So when somebody calls me a groupie, I say, thank you very much, is essentially, I'm paraphrasing there, but
Yeah.
that's essentially what she's saying is like, if you're going to use that word in the pejorative, check yourself, check where that's coming from.
I still, at this stage of my game, every few weeks or so on Instagram, well, not so much Instagram, but on Facebook, usually somebody just says, like yesterday, someone said, are you embarrassed about
Oh
writing
my
on
God.
about writing on with the band? Are you embarrassed about it? Today, it was a woman too. That really upsets me.
Mm-hmm.
I said, absolutely not. And I've written 5 books since then. So, people still think, oh God, she admitted she's fucked people. Everyone fucks people. If they're,
Most of us do, yeah.
99% of the people fuck people.
Right.
So I just happen to have sex and relationships and romances with musicians. And
Right.
it's so simple.
Right. And I think, the common misconception is that groupie and feminist don't go together. But I've heard you talk about this before, and I agree with you. I mean, if you are a woman and you're going for what you want, and think about in the 60s and 70s with the GTOs and some of the other groupies, like Anita Pallenberg, style setter. You guys, you women, style setters, rule breakers, rock and roll muses, all of these songs that were inspired by groupies.
Yep. And I'm really proud of the whole thing. And it turned into, when I wrote the book, I had no idea if anyone was going to read it. You never know that. I was one of the very first, quotes, nobodies to write a memoir, which I think opened doors for a lot of people to write their memoirs who weren't celebrities or big politicians or, So I'm proud of that part of it. And I was a woman doing what I wanted to do. When I did those TV shows early on, 87, you would not believe the stuff I got from people.
Yes, I would, because I was watching.
Oh, you were? They hadn't read it. They just saw, oh, she's writing about her sex life, which is a very small part of the book, actually.
Yeah. No, I read the book when it came out. I was, I think, 17 when it came out, and I got it. I heard of it when I was 18. But Pamela, I was watching you on shows like Oprah and I think Geraldo. And there were some, I remember one show, I don't remember if it was Geraldo or Oprah, where Gene Simmons and
that was
okay, yeah. And Jackie Collins was on. No, was it Jackie Collins?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw all that stuff, and I thought, the question she's getting, come on, y'all.
She wrote a horrible book called Rock Star.
Mm-hmm.
She dabbled outside of her element, which, she's a wonderful writer in her element. But I reviewed that book for Rolling Stone, and it was the only time I was actually pretty mean in print. Because I ended the review, something's happening, but you don't know what it is. Do you, Miss Collins?
Oh, snap.
Yeah. But she was out of her element. She was out of her element, and it was a really silly book. But I didn't get to say much on that.
No, you did not.
Because Gene and Paul hogged it all, especially Gene. And he's a friend of mine, but, in fact, he's helped me twice with my books.
Wow.
I was writing on with the band. I was going to call it Memoir of a Groupie. And he went, I got it. Confessions of a Groupie.
He came up with that.
Yeah, Confessions. Yeah. He said, that makes it more titillating. And I ran into him at Book Soup, one of my favorite bookstores, local bookstores. I've done a lot of readings there. And we were chit-chatting there. And he said, what are you going to write next? And I said, I really don't know. This is my 3rd book. And he said, you should do Rock and Roll Babylon. Oh, wow, that would be a hard book to write, which became Rock Bottom, book, which was very hard to write. It's the 25 stories of rock and roll tragedies. Yeah, it's on Kindle, but it's not in print anymore. It's only on Kindle. I got a huge deal with that. It's my 3rd book, and that
Wow.
who my editor, they fired him and nobody cared about the book, sadly.
Hmm.
And I think it's a really good, very well researched. I sell them on my website, Pamela did
Okay.
so yeah. I have to go find them and buy them in bookstores and stuff, and then I sell them
Oh,
signed.
wow.
I sell all my books signed there.
Well, speaking of I'm with the band, after that came out, and you did face some crazy comments, I love this recent quote from your ex-husband, Michael Debar. And because he said to a reporter when he was asked how he felt about the stories in the book, and I love this, he said, I think they're actually jewels in her crown. To spend time with all of those extraordinary artists, I think she gave as good as she got. Miss Pamela was very much part of rock and roll history. I think they call it a muse, don't they? And that's exactly what she was and remains. That's lovely.
Yeah, we have a great relationship. He's like a brother now.
Mm,
We were together 14 years and have a son, and we remain very close because of Nick. We wanted to make him first, put him
yeah.
first. And I love his wife, Britta. It's a really like a family situation, and we're like siblings now. He's an only child, and so am I, and so's Nick, and Michael and I are like siblings. I really count on him and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Okay, so there are so many people that I would love to ask you about, but I know we don't have time. So I've narrowed it down to five. And I'm
Okay.
just going to throw out their names and you try and come up with one word to describe them.
Word. Oh boy.
Oh
Okay.
boy.
All
Graham
right.
Parsons.
Magic.
I love his work. And I don't know if you know the writer Dana Spiotta, but I was talking to her and she said, because she wrote the novel Eat the Document, she says she has tried to slip a shout out to him in as many of her books as she can. She just loves Graham.
Well, I promised his spirit when he passed. I went to Joshua Tree in the room he died in, and I used to at that point I was channeling white light. I've done it all, and I promised him that night that I would carry his music on, his legacy, and I would, keep him alive out there. And I have done that.
You have. You
I keep
absolutely have.
I keep doing it. I wrote I had a column at Please Kill Me for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote a really great, if I don't say so myself, piece on him. I elaborated on a lot of the stories, and I'm with the band in those columns. And he he influenced me in a way that I don't think anyone else, and maybe Victor and Don Van Vliet, because they changed my life. And so did Graham, though. Graham
Yeah.
sat Mercy and I down one night and just made us listen to country music. George Jones, well, you know all this. George Jones, Willie Whalen, Ray Price. I mean, it was soul expanding. And he wept. He loved it so much. He would cry through these, especially George Jones. He called him the King of Broken Hearts, and
Mm.
expanded my music awareness and ability to take in. I mean, it was I can't. It's beyond what I can say. Uh,
Yeah, I can imagine.
and his daughter Polly, he asked me to babysit her. He called one time, said, "You want to can you come over and babysit Polly?" She was only a year and a half old, and she's my goddaughter. I
Hmm.
mean, she has been all this time, and so he also gave me that.
Why do you think he's not more well known? He was so brilliant.
Uh, well, the Eagles came on. Uh, people took from him, took what he put out, and he died at
Yeah,
26. So they carried it on in their way, in their fashion. But I mean, what he might have done is just, I mean, of course, at 26 he'd done all that. The first two Burritos albums and his two solo records are just pure. And Polly just got a hold of some recordings of him and Emmylou in '73 that she did a GoFundMe for. Did you see that?
yes.
They got over $100,000 to put this record out.
Oh my
To,
God.
so there's going to be a new record of him singing with Emmylou. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
So
I,
he is adored and revered by
a
really
lot of
cool
people.
people, really cool people who totally get what he contributed, and Hillman too. I mean, it wasn't just Graham. Graham was the pretty boy who died. Hillman also they were partners in this music. Chris
Yeah.
had a band called the Hillman. He played mandolin and all that pre Birds. So they were very kindred musically. They didn't see eye to eye on a lot of other stuff though.
This I have heard.
Oh.
I always wanted to ask you, I've got a framed copy of The Gilded Palace of Sin on my wall. There are these two women in the little cabin thing. Do you know who they are?
Models. They were just models.
Okay.
And Rosie and I went, why the heck? Why didn't you use some of the GTOs for that? You know?
Mm-hmm.
We went to their debut at the A&M Soundstage's big party, man, for the Flying Burrito Brothers. No one had ever heard of them.
Yeah.
And they were members of the Byrds. So Graham was briefly in the Byrds. So a lot of people showed up and they were like, what kind of music is this? People say, so many people now say, oh, I was at the Palomino. And Mercy and I sometimes, and 3 or 4 other people were there.
Mm-hmm.
We just,
Okay.
we just got it. We got that music. You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I got 4 more. Frank Zappa,
Mentor.
Keith Moon.
Tears of a Clown. Sorry,
Wow.
there were words there.
That fits. Mick Jagger.
Yeah. Hot.
Good kisser?
Besides being hot, though, he was fun. He had a real light-hearted majesty about him that was he knew where he stood in the world, but he also thought it was amusing. Same with Robert Plant. They're both Leos.
Oh, okay.
They knew what they meant, but they also know who they were pretty down deep. And Mick was just a lot of fun. He's not someone I said, oh, I'm going to land him, you know. Yeah, we were having a good time.
Right. Well, you know, I'm going to ask about this last one, Jimmy Page.
Very mysterious man. Mysterious, yes.
Whatever happened to the Led Zeppelin 2 acetate?
Oh, don't ask. Oh, I was really angry at him at one point, and I needed money. So besides the acetate demo that he worked on in my apartment with Robert, whenever I do my rock tour, I take people to that spot and I say there should be a plaque here. You know, this is where Led Zeppelin 2 was, you know, put together. Anyway, all his notes and everything, I sold them for $50 with the acetate.
Oh my God. Wow.
There was a newspaper called The Recycler then, and I put it in there. Some guy came over to my mom's house and bought it from me. And I keep wondering where that thing might be now.
Wow.
Yeah. Probably worth 100 times that now.
Be worth a lot of money.
Yeah. 1,000 times more. 1,000 times. Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about you when you sat down to write that book that you wrote.
Yeah.
Did you have, I always like to ask writers this. Did you have an outline? Had you thought out the entire thing before you sat down to write it?
No, I'm a pantser. I'm not a planner. I had the first chapter and I had the very last line. But, and I knew that at some point the character was going to go to England to try and search for him because I had kind of done that when my mother died in 2003, and I was just devastated. And my first marriage was breaking up, and I knew I had to do something to shake myself out of that grief cycle. And Jimmy Page and the music of Led Zeppelin had been so important to me from the time I was 15, and my mother was kind of wrapped up in that too. That I heard he was going to be judging a guitar contest with Brian May, and I thought, well, I've got to go. So I made that journey to heal. But no, I didn't. I had an idea, but I didn't outline or plan. I just kind of let it evolve.
And how many hours a day did you work on it?
I didn't start seriously working on it until my second husband died. So there I was again.
Wow.
Yeah, he died of cancer in 2014. And it was another devastating thing. And I thought, I'm not going to fall apart this time. I'm going to turn to art and write my way out of this. So I pretty much wrote. He died in May, and so I teach, and I got off mid-May, and I didn't teach summer school that year, so I would write all day long that first summer.
All day. God.
Pretty well. It was just, you know what? I was going to go under if I didn't.
Right. Well, good for you, honey. I always want to know, how, because a lot of people ask me, just like Stephen King, when he turned 70, he told me, well, I wish he told me, I read that he stopped writing 8 hours a day and wrote 4 hours a day when he hit 70. And that's how I felt. I thought, I can only write now about 4.5 hours a day. Yeah. I'm doing a book now with Jane Petty, who is Tom Petty's first wife of 25.
Wow. I've
been working on that with her for 3 years. It's overdue. There's so much there. I'd never written someone else's story for them, and it's a very different way of writing. And wow. So that's what I've been doing. And if people want to reach me, they can go to PamelaDeBarOfficial.com. Most of my information is on there, but I sell all kinds of stuff on there and to tell you what's going on, classes and all that stuff that I do all over the country. I'm going to Austin next week to teach there. And what else? Oh yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. My name.
Cool. And you've got the rock tours, which one day I hope I can get out there and take, because that would be amazing.
I hope so too. I think you'll enjoy it. I take you to Graham Parsons' old place where Ian Hillman wrote the second album, and it's the brick. I wrote a song myself about it called Brick Pillars, and the same brick pillars are still there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Keep rocking it, Miss Pamela. You are amazing, and I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. This is such an honor and a thrill.
Thank you, honey. I really appreciate you having me on.
Rock is lit.